Disney is one of those companies that just keeps buying up every single property that they can get their hands on and pumping it out in mediocre fashion. Sometimes you get a hit like The Lion King, and sometimes you get, well, these duds. Welcome to Beyond the Screen, I'm Nate, and these are the top 10 worst Disney movies ever made. Number 10, Haunted Mansion. The Haunted Mansion was just released in theaters and boasts an all-star cast with Tiffany Haddish, Owen Wilson, Danny DeVito, and so many more. While the initial reviews have been rough to say the least, the movie has failed to make us forget about the original live-action Haunted Mansion movie released in 2003 starring comedy icon Eddie Murphy in the leading role. This was another movie based on an existing Disney Parks ride, the likes of Pirates of the Caribbean and Country Bears. Yeah, that's right, remember that one? The plot followed Eddie and his family traveling to a mansion that they soon discover is overrun with ghosts. While they attempt to escape, they learn an important lesson about the power of family. So this movie sucked, right? It failed to be funny, Eddie was given basically nothing to work with, and unfortunately delivered a one-note performance compared to his other projects. The film currently sits at an impressive 13% on Rotten Tomatoes, with many audiences agreeing that the movie was just not scary, funny, or even entertaining enough to rewatch in the future. Now, I've not seen the new version of this movie, but considering the special effects that Disney is capable of these days, it should be at least a little bit more entertaining than the first one. Number 7, The Lion King. No, I am not a monster, and I'm not talking about the 1994 animated classic. That would be nuts. It's literally one of the best movies ever made, and no, I'm talking about the remake, baby. In 2019, as part of Disney's master plan to make as much money as possible off of existing properties, a live-action remake of The Lion King was brought to theaters, featuring an all-star cast like Seth Rogen, Donald Glover, and the original voice of Mufasa, James Earl Jones. Of course, just because Disney was remaking a project doesn't mean that they've updated it in any way. The Lion King was basically a shot-for-shot remake of the original, with the biggest changes being the hyper-realistic animation, which Disney really needs to stop doing. My god, The Little Mermaid was a mess, and it would have made this list, but they added new songs, and Melissa McCarthy was pretty good as Ursula, so I'll leave that one alone today. The only redeeming factor of this movie was Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen's Timon and Pumbaa. They were the only characters that had improvised dialogue, and they did everything they could to save the project. Unfortunately, the film failed to capture any heart that the original had, and instead left fans questioning if they should really keep up this whole live-action remake thing, but I'm personally dreading the day that they announce a live-action Lilo and Stitch movie. Number 8, Peter Pan. Peter Pan. A movie that asked the world, what turned the red man red? Yep, that's right, that's an actual line from the movie Peter Pan. I didn't make that up. That line is followed by one of the most racist and cringy songs that's ever been recorded in Disney history. The story of Peter Pan is not bad at all. It's creepy, but it's not bad. A young man flies through a window one night and steals 3 British children, whisking them away to a magical island where they never have to grow old and they can spend all day battling pirates. Sounds neat, right? Well, Disney decided to adapt that story into a cartoon in the 1950s, and I do mean every part of that story. A story which heavily features a tribe of Native Americans living on the island, but they age for some reason. Along their journey, Peter and the gang rescue a young woman named Tiger Lily, who is the daughter of the chief of the tribe. And this is when the movie becomes unwatchable, and it's the reason there is now a 15-second warning that appears on Disney Plus before the movie starts, that the film contains offensive subject matter. The chief speaks in sign language that is clearly meant to be silly and unrealistic, yet moments later he speaks English just fine, albeit with the most stereotypical accent that you have ever heard. Then the chief inhales some herbs from a comically large pipe before singing the song that I mentioned earlier, a song that I can't quote because our channel will be just shut down immediately. Plus, I don't know, I don't want to quote it because it's just difficult to watch and it's disgusting. I almost spit my coffee out while scripting this entry. If you haven't seen Peter Pan in a while and you don't believe me, go watch it. The scene starts at 49 minutes and 19 seconds. Have fun. Number 7, Jungle Cruise. Okay, Hollywood, quit dropping Dwayne Johnson in the middle of the jungle and filming it, please. This Disney ride-turned movie was meant to be the first of many ride-themed live-action movies being made after the success of the first 3 Pirates of the Caribbean movies, not the last 2. We don't talk about those ones. It featured a pretty solid cast. As I mentioned, Dwayne Johnson was cast as the leading jungle man again, and this time he was accompanied by Emily Blunt and Jack Whitehall. The story was actually pretty neat for something based on a theme park ride. It followed the gang trying to find the Tree of Life that possessed possessed unbelievable healing abilities. Of all the movies on this list, it's actually been pretty decently reviewed and it made a lot of money. However, that gave the studio confidence to go ahead on more ride-themed projects, hence the reboot and the release of Haunted Mansion, which so far has just terrible reviews. Now let's hope that this one tanks so hard that Disney stops making ride-based movies and comes up with something original for once. Number 6. Strange World. This animated Disney feature was released last year and basically went straight to Disney Plus, seemingly because the studio knew that they would be making little to nothing back from the project. The film featured the voices of Jake Gyllenhaal, Alan Tudyk, Dennis Quaid, and Lucy Liu, and it followed Searcher Quaid, a farmer who comes from a long line of adventurers and is forced to go on a journey to save his home and discover what is poisoning the world's fuel. The film is actually based on an existing property from the 1950s, which was originally a sci-fi comic series. Disney purchased the property and adapted it into the animated feature that we got, and while the film is stunning, it honestly has some of the most incredible, intricate, and beautiful animation in Disney history. That's the only thing it's got going for it. The plot is thin and the characters turn on Searcher for seemingly no reason other than plot. There is a strong message in this movie about acceptance and family, but it's bogged down by terrible dialogue, boring action sequences, and a plot twist that is even more confusing than you could even imagine. I'm not gonna spoil it just in case you're curious. Number 5. Planes. Now, if the title of this movie sounds like a ripoff of Cars, it was. Planes, a movie released in 2013, was meant to be a follow-up series to the popular Cars franchise. A movie that followed sentient cars, played by Owen Wilson, Larry the Cable Guy, and so many more. Planes boasted a pretty solid cast too, with the likes of Gabriel Iglesias, Dan Cook, and Val Kilmer, who really needs a new headshot. My god, he is horrifying. The first thing that buried this movie before it was released was the blatant animation ripoff, just plastering a pair of eyes and mouth on a pre-existing vehicle. The second was that the film seemed to rely on the fact that it was colorful and filled with goofy voices rather than delivering a good story like the original Cars. The first movie was basically a redemption story where we wanted Lightning McQueen to succeed. Ka-chow! Sorry, I just needed to get that out of my system. It didn't seem to matter what Disney was trying to do. While the movie was a good distraction for younger audiences and more than likely made Disney millions in the toy department, audiences and critics agreed that it was a messy slop fest trying to instill some nostalgia for a movie that wasn't even that old. Number 4. Aladdin, The Return of Jafar. Now, most films on this list are poorly reviewed as well as hated by fans. This one's actually considered to be a critical darling, but fans of the genie were disappointed to say the least. Much like most original animated classics, Aladdin received 2 sequels following the success of the original 1992 release, King of Thieves, the third movie, and Return of Jafar, the one that we'll be talking about on this list. Now, this movie is decent, but much like all Disney cartoon sequels, the animation is different, and the budget was clearly lower for the sequel that received a straight-to-home video release. Not a DVD, but one of those big old VHS tapes. I miss Disney tapes. While the sequel was a success with critics, fans of the original noticed immediately that the genie sounded a little bit off. Well, that was because the late comedy legend Robin Williams, who voiced the genie in the first movie, refused to participate in the sequel thanks to Disney being sneaky and shady. Following the success of the first movie, the studio fast-tracked a sequel and started the marketing campaign, a campaign that included lines from the genie that were used to sell Aladdin merchandise, something that Robin had absolutely no knowledge of until he saw himself trying to sell an Aladdin lunchbox. According to Robin at the time, it felt like a massive betrayal of trust, and he backed out of his role, instead being played by the voice of Homer Simpson, Dan Castellaneta. Thankfully, he did return for the third film, but by then everyone stopped caring about Aladdin and just wanted more Robin. We miss you, man. Number 3. Chicken Little. Who remembers this little animated feature from 2005? No? Nobody? Yeah, that's fair. Chicken Little was one of Disney's first attempts at a computer animated feature film outside of Pixar. The film followed the titular chicken after he's hit by a piece of the sky, but is unable to prove it to his small town and is pegged a loser. It is eventually revealed that there have been aliens living above them the entire time, and Chicken Little was right. The film featured a solid voice cast with Zach Braff, Joan Cusack, and even Sir Patrick Stewart. Unfortunately, the dialogue made no sense, and most of the time it just felt like it was a series of small jokes that Disney were trying to make that just didn't land. Not to mention, the midway point of the movie sees Chicken Little finding a piece of the alien ship and bringing it back to his home, where he did not show any adult the proof that he just found. No wonder this whole thing has a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes. The whole movie could have been a 15-minute short film about the importance of communication. Number 2. Kazaam. Okay, I'm very excited to talk about this one because it was so bad. It single-handedly halted Shaq's acting career for a hot minute. The film stars Shaquille O'Neal as the titular genie summoned when a young man turns on a boombox, accidentally releasing Shaq onto the world. The plot of this movie featured a side story of Shaq's character wanting to start a career in the music industry, and it turns out that was an actual real-life thing that he was trying to do. It seemed like he was trying to make himself a triple threat, being an actor, a musician, and athlete, but it did not go so well. Kazaam sits at a perfect 5% with critics out of 100. 5. Calling the movie an overlapping mismatch of ideas that never seem to work well together. Not to mention, Shaquille O'Neal can't act! I'm sorry, yes, he can sell us all cream that goes from cold to hot, but he cannot convince me he's a genie. The movie released with minimal success, so much so that it failed to make back its $20 million price tag at the box office. Kazaam is now remembered as a schlocky little low-budget comedy that usually plays in the background of parties. You know, something you can talk over and zone into every now and then, but don't take this as an excuse to just rub random boom boxes. Okay? People don't like it when you do that. I found out the hard way. Number 1. Song of the South. Taking the top spot on our list is a movie that was so bad and fueled with racism that it was banned from theaters and received a very limited home release. Strap in, folks. Song of the South is a movie from way back in the day. A movie that is so messed up that they decided not to let it out into the world. The film was set on a plantation in Georgia. Red flag number 1. And follows a young man named Johnny who thinks he's just visiting the area for a getaway with his family, but learns that he'll be living here while his father is in Atlanta for work. Eventually, he meets the people around the plantation, the neighborhood, that's what it says online, including Uncle Remus, who always seems to find Johnny in times of struggle. Red flag number 2. Remus tells stories to Johnny that are animated into cartoons, and unfortunately, the time in which the film is set is never really specified, but it's made to feel like it's during a really dark time in history, and many people consider the project to be an upbeat glorification of a truly disgusting time in human history. Disney tried their best to cancel the project by banning it from ever receiving a home release and pulled it from theaters only 2 weeks after release. And those are the worst Disney movies ever made. Would you like to see a part 2 to this video? Let us know by leaving a like below and prove your loyalty. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you. You were an awesome human being and I wish you all the best in life. Thanks for stopping me on the screen today and we'll see you next time.